Well, schools who've lost students anxious about returning to class in a COVID climate fear that funding will be pulled next year if attendance keeps on slipping. Some schools in Northland, Auckland, Waikato and Gisborne have lost around 25% of their roll, and 10,000 students are now being homeschooled in New Zealand. Now, as Karen Rutherford reports, schools fear that their budget for support staff and admin could be slashed.
Term 2, week 2, but not everyone's back in class. At Whangarei Intermediate, the roll's down by 90 students this year. Some have even fallen off the radar completely.
We are concerned that there are students that aren't enrolled in any school, and we're worried for them.
The Ministry of Education says attendance has dropped from 90% nationally in the first week of the school year to 78% last month. In Northland, some schools had just 68% attendance. Auckland, Waikato and Tairāwhiti weren't much better. A whopping 10,500 Kiwi kids are now being homeschooled, up 40% in the past year.
They would rather keep them home. Our community is also quite vulnerable when it comes to their own health issues, and I don't think they want to compromise their own safety as well.
Schools get around $1,000 a year per student for operational funding. That covers things like the caretakers' hours, the photocopying and support staff. Teachers' salaries are funded separately, but if a student is away more than 20 days, they're classed as off the roll, and that affects funding. On current attendance, Whangarei Intermediate stands to lose up to $20,000 next year.
Anything that's over and above outside of the classroom will be affected by the lack of funding.
The Minister's concerned about attendance, and that includes truancy. He's just promised $88 million to fix it.
And so that's why you saw the announcement that we made last weekend about getting kids back into school. And our message to parents is now is the time to get kids back into school as well. I am concerned.
Because without the students, schools fear they'll lose the funding for all those crucial extras that makes them tick. Karen Rutherford, Newshub.
Well, for more on this, I'm now joined by Te Tai Tokerau Principals Association President Pat Newman. Pat, thanks for joining us. You've been a teacher for 44 years. Why do you think that kids are missing from our schools at the moment? There's a diverse set of reasons, aren't there?
There's a whole heap of reasons, and some of them are actually special to Te Tai Tokerau. We've always had lower numbers because people have been having to move up here for housing, for jobs and things like that. And these days, housing has had a big influence on people having to shift around. Tied up with that, there's all sorts of things such as an inherent distrust of governments by some people, and quite often that has been justified and possibly still is at times. There's been the socio-economic, so there's jobs appearing that you've got to have a house to live in to get a job. And then we've got the big one, which is COVID, where schools got put into the middle, and people started to think that if they sent their kids to school, the teachers were going to leap out of the bushes and inject them as they walk past. I'm being a bit cheeky there, but they did think we were going to inject them without permissions. Yeah. Others thought that if they sent the kids, they might catch things. There was every rumour mill you could possibly have up here, and it's sad because up here, back in the 20s, they went through the epidemic with the flu, and people have very short memories. But the hard result, the hard reality is there's over 3,000 kids missing in Te Tai Tokerau that are not in schools. Yeah. In primary schools that I'm talking about, and that's a heck of a lot.
It is. Where are they, Pat? What do you know about where they are?
Well, that's one of the problems we have. I know that the Ministry of Education is working closely with schools, but some of the other government sector groups need to actually work with us as well, because there are ways of using various agencies to find some of those children, but it's very hard that they haven't been necessarily cooperative in the past. And I won't name the groups, the two agencies that are. Most people should be able to work that out. But it's going to have to be a combined effort. It's no use just having money. I mean, money is needed, but we've got the money. Yeah. My view, it goes back to simple things. The realisation that if we don't have children in schools, we've got another generation and another generation of people being on the unemployment or looking for jobs or low income, all of that sort of carry on. And it really comes down to people saying, look, we have a responsibility, not on a negative side, but if it might be the neighbour looking over the fence and saying, hey, I notice your kids aren't there. Can I help if they walk to school with my kids? Would that help? Or nana or koro or auntie saying the same sort of thing. Can we help? Because there's a whole lot of bridge building that I think has to go on.
And it's sort of, and the clock is ticking as well, isn't it, for these kids who've now been out of school perhaps for months. You know, you're talking about another lost generation of kids there, really, but also for the schools. We're hearing that funding could be compromised for schools.
Well, it's not just funding. I disagree with what was said. I know it came from the minister, but I think a mistake was made.
No,
it also affects staffing. The July return ones affect the number of teachers you have in a school. You can appeal it, it's called extraordinary role growth, but it's quite hard to get it. So not only that, we are, if suddenly up here, if next year we get all of these kids back, which we hope to get back, we may not have the teachers because we've had to get rid of them because the roll numbers haven't gone up this year.
Yeah.
We're not talking about this year's teachers, we're talking about next year's.
And as we know, teacher schools always need to hang on to their funding and to their teachers. You do a lot of work to get them there. Pat Newman, thanks so much for joining us at 8 p.m. this evening.
Not a problem. Good night.